On September 16th, and thank you, Madam Chair, and members for holding this hearing, because I think there's a high degree of public interest and concern about the decisions of the local board. So I'm really glad we're able to explore it in a public forum like this. On September 16th, Councilmember Berliner, who I know wishes he could be here with us, but he's out on his honeymoon, and I sent a letter to support the two highly successful sites at the Jane Lawton Center and the Marilyn Praisner Center. I hope today's hearing will especially, from my point of view, be a good venue to hear a response to many of the questions I asked in that letter that I think haven't been answered. When I was in the General Assembly, I was an original co-sponsor of the early voting legislation that put the early voting amendment before the voters. I remember very clearly that debate. It was very clearly the intent of the law to improve convenience and remove delays, reduce delays, and increase total voter participation. In that spirit, I have a lot of concerns about the county board's decision because I believe it violates the intent of the legislation as it was passed by the General Assembly and then ratified as a constitutional amendment by the voters. I certainly recognize your need to routinely reassess the county's early voting sites. We move precincts around from time to time to assess their effectiveness, and it makes sense to change voting sites. But it makes sense only to begin with an exploration of the least successful, lowest performing sites, not the highest performing sites. State election law describes your duties as the local board very clearly, and the authors of the state election law in Section 202 were very parsimonious in their choice of words. The local board is only required to oversee the conduct of elections in the county and ensure that the elections process is conducted in an open, convenient, and impartial manner. Open, convenient, and impartial. And you all know this as well as I do. I think it's interesting that the authors of that law chose the word convenient. That is one of the only three charges that you have as far as conducting elections. Our collective job is to remove barriers to voting and to facilitate convenience. And by that standard, I think your decision to remove Lawton and Praisner fails because those are much more convenient than the alternate sites that that you've chosen. The locations, by that standard, should be placed in the areas of the greatest population density to maximize convenience. And I think it's another consideration, very important one, that early voting in East County is an affront really to the voting rights of voters of color. It is the #1 performing site for voters of color in Montgomery County and the second highest performing site overall. I know we all say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I think you all probably live by that maxim. I've said that to your kids and others from time to time. I don't understand what was ever broke about Lawton and Praisner. They were highly successful, highly performing, and yet the choice of the local board has been to close them and to deny voters within a few miles of those sites from utilizing those sites. You also know previously plans have been made to expand early voting hours and allow early same-day registration during the 2016 elections to boost turnout. And the county board's decision to eliminate the East County location used by those voters completely undermines that reform because the voters who are the most likely to use same-day registration are both voters of color and lower income voters, and you've just taken away their #1 voting site. So I'm looking forward to the discussion today. Just a word about the proposed legislation. I'm very glad Senator Matalino is here, and I've spoken to him and I've spoken to Delegate Ludke, and I value both of them as colleagues, and I really enjoyed serving with them in the General Assembly. I think what they're proposing is, I haven't seen it yet, but it sounds very wise to me, and certainly in a county of a million people, we shouldn't be limited to 9 voting sites. The debate when we passed the early voting legislation was very robust, and many people thought early voting would be unsuccessful and unpopular. In fact, it has been wildly successful and wildly popular, and on days of early voting, there's still lines out the door. So we need more sites, not fewer, and it would be great if the state assembly allows us to have more sites, in my view. However, it is hard to pass a bill in Annapolis. There are many barriers, and it takes a long time. And if a bill is passed, it will certainly take all of you and the local board and your staff time to set up new voting sites. And I fear that even if the legislation is to pass, it will not be able to take effect in time for the primaries. I hope that's not true, but I have that concern. And my general point is the General Assembly, while they should, I believe, expand the number of voting sites, shouldn't have to ride to the rescue here. That's great as a backup plan, but I really hope we keep the focus today on what is happening, how you made your decision. I hope we better understand it, and I hope we call up some information that will be put before the State Board when they consider your recommendations. Thank you, Madam Chair.